The bullet was meant for Jake Morrison's heart, but Sarah Chin moved faster than anyone thought possible. 3 days ago, he'd fired her with a smirk and a dismissive wave, telling her she was too paranoid for his lifestyle. Now she was bleeding on the polished marble floor of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, the would-be assassin's gun in her hand, and 200 of Los Angeles' elite frozen in shocked silence. Jake stared down at the woman who just saved his life, the same woman whose resume he'd never bothered to read, and felt his carefully constructed world shatter into pieces. Her daughter's crayon drawing was still in her jacket pocket, a stick figure with a cape and the words, "My Mom the Hero," scrawled in purple marker. The quarterback's hands were shaking as he pressed his tuxedo jacket against her shoulder wound, her blood soaking through the expensive fabric, while sirens wailed in the distance. "Don't you dare die on me," he whispered, but Sarah's eyes were already fluttering close, her breathing shallow and uneven. The security detail he'd chosen instead of her, 3 ex-college football players who looked good in suits, had frozen completely when the gunman appeared, proving every concern she'd voiced in those 3 short days. Jake had thought his fame made him untouchable, that his charm could smooth over any threat, that a woman like Sarah was just overreacting to justify her job. He'd been so catastrophically wrong that it might have cost both their lives. Behind him, his girlfriend Brittany was screaming about her dress being ruined. His business manager was on his phone frantically, and his agent was already calculating how to spin this for publicity. But Jake couldn't look away from Sarah's face, from the purple heart tattoo barely visible above her collar, from the scars on her hands that told stories he'd never asked about. 3 days of work, and she'd learned his patterns, identified his vulnerabilities, predicted the exact scenario that had nearly killed him tonight, and he'd fired her for being too cautious. The paramedics burst through the ballroom doors, but Jake already knew the truth. Sarah Chun had saved his life, and he didn't even know her daughter's name. Hello, my friends. Before we continue our story, leave your like, share the story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Jake Morrison's penthouse overlooked downtown Dallas like a throne room surveying a kingdom, all floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. He bought it 3 years ago after signing his $180 million contract extension with the Cowboys, the kind of money that made him feel invincible in a city that worshipped football. The walls were covered with championship photos and magazine covers, testaments to the Golden Arm that had thrown 63 touchdowns last season alone. His agent Brad always said that Jake didn't just play football. He was football, the kind of superstar who sold jerseys faster than they could print them. But standing here now, staring at his reflection in the window with a protein shake he didn't want, Jake felt a familiar emptiness that success never quite filled. His phone buzzed with 100 messages of the morning. Sponsor requests, party invitations, women he barely remembered offering to catch up over drinks. Brad had scheduled 4 media appearances for today alone, all carefully choreographed to maintain the golden boy image that paid for this view. Jake's girlfriend Brittany was in the bedroom doing her makeup for their afternoon appearance at a children's hospital charity event, the kind of photo op that his publicist insisted made him relatable and caring. He could hear her on FaceTime with her followers, describing her outfit in breathless detail, while 20,000 people hung on every word. 2 years together. And Jake sometimes wondered if she'd notice if he stopped talking entirely, or she'd just keep posting their relationship to her 5 million Instagram followers like he was another handbag. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts, and Brad walked in without waiting for an answer, his Bluetooth earpiece blinking like an urgent warning. "Your new bodyguard is downstairs," he announced, scrolling through his tablet without looking up at Jake's face or reading his mood. Female, former military, came highly recommended by the security firm after that incident last month with a fan who broke into your garage. Jake frowned, remembering the drunk college kid who'd somehow bypassed his previous security and spray-painted "Go Eagles" on his Lamborghini. The old security team had been fired immediately, and Brad had insisted on someone more professional, less visible, won't cramp your style at clubs. But a female bodyguard? Jake could already hear the jokes from his teammates, the questions about whether he needed his mommy to protect him now. "She better not be some butch stereotype who scares away women," Jake said, trying for humor but hearing his own defensiveness echo in the empty space. Brad finally looked up, his expression sharp with the calculation that had made him the most successful agent in the NFL. Sarah Chun, Marine Corps, 3 tours overseas. She's qualified, discreet, and she needs a work. Single mom situation, looking for steady income. Something in Brad's tone suggested he'd negotiated a lower rate based on her desperation. The kind of business move that Jake usually appreciated, but today made his stomach turn. He nodded anyway, because that's what you did when you were 28 and rich and surrounded by people who made decisions for you. Brittany emerged from the bedroom in a dress that probably cost more than Sarah Chen's monthly rent, checking her reflection one final time before gracing the world with her presence. Sarah stood in the lobby with her back to the wall, her eyes tracking every person who entered or exited with the quiet intensity of someone who'd learned to notice threats before they materialized. She wore dark pants and a blazer that concealed her sidearm, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. No makeup or jewelry to catch attention. At 32, she'd learned to make herself invisible when necessary, a skill that kept her alive in Fallujah and Kandahar and a dozen other places that still visited her dreams. The security guard at the desk kept glancing at her nervously, probably wondering if she was there to rob the place rather than protect its most famous resident. She'd grown used to that look over the past 6 months. The suspicion that followed her whenever she showed up in spaces designed for people with different backgrounds and bigger bank accounts. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter's school. Mia did great on her spelling test. And Sarah allowed herself a small smile before tucking the phone away. 6 years old and already reading at a 3rd grade level, her baby girl who drew pictures of soldiers and said she wanted to be brave like Mommy when she grew up. Sarah had taken this job despite the pay cut and the commute because it meant regular hours, no deployments, no missing bedtimes or birthday parties. After losing David in Helmand Province 3 years ago, after the military told her she could either stay deployed or resign her commission, the choice had been simple. Mia needed her mother more than the Marines needed another captain, even if it meant taking work that didn't match her qualifications or challenge her skills. The elevator dinged and Brad stepped out, sizing her up with the kind of quick assessment that Sarah recognized from boardrooms and battlefields alike. Miss Chen, I'm Brad Foster, Mr. Morrison's agent. Let's be clear about expectations. Your job is to keep him safe without making him feel unsafe, if you understand the distinction. Sarah understood perfectly. Look professional but stay invisible. Prevent problems without restricting his lifestyle. Sacrifice yourself if necessary without becoming a headline. She'd read the contract already, including the NDA that would bankrupt her if she ever spoke about what she witnessed on the job. This wasn't about her Marine Corps training or her force recon experience or the 3 citations for valor sitting in a box in her closet. This was about babysitting a rich kid who'd never faced consequences. I understand, Sarah said evenly, meeting Brad's gaze without flinching away from the power dynamics he was trying to establish. He nodded, satisfied that she knew her place, and gestured toward the elevator. Mr. Morrison is on a tight schedule today. Charity event at the Children's Hospital at 2, dinner meeting with sponsors at 7, club appearance at 11. You'll need to coordinate with his driver, stay in communication with our team, and above all, he paused for emphasis, making sure she heard the threat underneath the politeness. Don't make him regret hiring you. Jake's first impression of Sarah Chun was that she looked nothing like the bodyguards in movies. No sunglasses or intimidating bulk. Just a quiet Asian woman who stood near the door like she was waiting for permission to exist. This is her? He asked Brad, not bothering to hide his skepticism as Brittany emerged from the bedroom and immediately started laughing. Oh my God, Jake. She's like 5'4". What you could do, karate chop someone while you duck. The joke wasn't even funny, but Brittany laughed at her own humor anyway. Already pulling out her phone to text her friends about Jake's adorable tiny bodyguard. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Jake noticed her jaw tighten slightly, the kind of micro-expression that suggested she'd heard worse insults and survived them. Ms. Chinkum's highly recommended. Brad said diplomatically, though his tone suggested he shared their doubts about whether this woman could actually protect anything. Sarah stepped forward, extending her hand with military precision, her grip firm enough to surprise Jake when he shook it. Mr. Morrison, I'll need to review your schedule, inspect your vehicles, and discuss security protocols before we leave for today's events. Her voice was professional and calm, no apology for taking up his time or space. Something about her confidence irritated Jake. The way she stood there acting like she belonged in his penthouse when she was clearly just another person on his payroll. He'd grown up poor in rural Texas, fought his way to the NFL through talent and determination, and now he had to take orders from someone who worked for him? Look, Sarah, can I call you Sarah? Jake didn't wait for her answer, already moving past her toward the closet where his jackets hung in color-coordinated rows. Brad hired you because of that garage incident, but let's be real, that was just some drunk kid, not exactly a national security threat. He pulled out a leather jacket, checking himself in the mirror while Brittany wrapped herself around his arm like an expensive accessory. I need security that doesn't make me look paranoid or out of touch. My fans expect access, you know? Half my brand value comes from being approachable and real. Sarah listened without interrupting, her eyes tracking the room's exits and angles while Jake explained why his image mattered more than his safety. Brittany started giggling again, whispering something to Jake about whether Sarah had to follow them into the bedroom, and Jake grinned despite himself. The point is, he continued, feeling Brittany's nails dig possessively into his arm, I don't need someone hovering over me 24/7 like I'm the president or something. Brad says you're qualified. Fine, but don't cramp my style. No telling me which parties I can attend or which fans I can talk to. Think you can handle that? The question was deliberately condescending, testing whether Sarah would push back or accept her place in his hierarchy. Most people either argued or immediately agreed. Sarah did neither, just maintained that infuriatingly calm expression while she processed requirements like a computer calculating acceptable risk. Mr. Morrison, my job is to keep you alive, not popular, Sarah said finally, her tone remaining respectful but refusing to be diminished by his dismissal. If you want someone to carry your bags and smile for cameras, hire an assistant. If you want actual security, then we need to establish protocols that balance your public access with realistic threat assessment. She pulled out a tablet, displaying a document that Brad and Jake hadn't bothered to review. The threat analysis from a security firm listing everything from obsessed fans to gambling-related violence. Last season alone, you received 47 credible threats. That drunk kid in your garage was the 23rd person to bypass your previous security. The NFL has mandatory protection requirements for players in your income bracket, which is why your insurance company insisted on professional coverage. Jake felt his face flush with anger at being lectured in his own home by someone who'd been here for less than 10 minutes. Are you seriously telling me how to live my life right now? Brad, is she seriously doing this? But Brad was actually reading the threat assessment now, his expression shifting from amused dismissal to genuine concern as he scrolled through pages of documented incidents. Brittany squeezed Jake's arm tighter, her voice rising to that pitch she used when she wanted attention. Baby, she's being totally dramatic. Tell her that you don't need some paranoid military person ruining your vibe. You're Jake Morrison. Nobody would actually hurt you. The absolute certainty in her voice would have been touching if it wasn't so dangerously naive. Sarah closed her tablet, recognizing the dynamic she'd walked into. The rich client who thought fame meant invincibility, the girlfriend who saw security as competition, the agent who cared more about quarterly earnings and long-term survival. She'd seen versions of this before. Officers who thought rank meant immunity. Contractors who ignored intelligence reports because they wanted to believe they were special. I'll give you 3 days, she said quietly, the offer catching everyone off guard. 3 days where I do my job professionally without interfering in your personal life unless absolutely necessary. After that, you can decide whether you want real protection or just someone to hold your jacket. 3 days? Jake laughed, the sound sharp and mocking in a way he perfected for dealing with coaches who questioned his plays. How about you last 3 hours without pissing me off? Deal. He extended his hand sarcastically, expecting her to back down from the challenge. Sarah shook it firmly, her grip strong enough to remind him she wasn't just decoration, then stepped back into her professional stance. Brittany was already on her phone, texting her followers about the awkward drama with Jake's new bodyguard, turning their entire conversation into content. Brad checked his watch and announced they needed to leave for the hospital event, his tone suggesting this whole confrontation had wasted valuable time that could have been spent on something productive like Jake's brand or appearance. The Children's Hospital charity event was exactly the kind of publicity gold that Brad lived for. Cameras everywhere, sick kids who made Jake look compassionate, and enough wealthy donors to justify the 2-hour time investment. Sarah had insisted on arriving 30 minutes early to inspect the venue, which Jake found absolutely ridiculous until she pointed out 3 separate security failures in the existing setup. Unmonitored side entrance, no bag checks for VIP guests, and sight lines that would make it easy for anyone to approach Jake in the crowded ballroom. He dismissed the concerns with a wave, telling Brad that she was too paranoid for civilian life, but had reluctantly agreed to let her make some arrangements with the hospital security team. Now Jake stood on a small stage, holding a signed football, while a 9-year-old cancer patient named Tyler beamed up at him with the kind of hero worship that always made these events worthwhile. The photographers captured every angle. Jake's genuine smile, Tyler's bald head from chemotherapy, Brittany strategically positioned to show off her dress while looking maternal and caring. "This is what it's all about," Jake told the crowd, his media training kicking in automatically as he delivered the speech his publicist had written. "These kids are the real heroes, and if my presence can brighten their day even a little bit, then I'm honored to be here." The applause was thunderous, and Jake felt a familiar rush of validation that came from being publicly appreciated. Sarah watched from the side of the ballroom, her position carefully chosen to monitor both the stage and the main entrance while staying out of photographs. She'd noticed a man in the back 40 minutes ago, mid-40s, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, too focused on Jake to be a casual attendee. His body language was wrong, tense and coiled like someone preparing for action rather than enjoying a charity event. She'd run his face through the threat database on her phone and found nothing, but her instincts, honed through 3 tours and countless missions, were screaming that something was off. When she tried to alert Brad earlier, he'd waved her away impatiently, annoyed that she was interrupting his conversation with a potential sponsor. Nobody wanted to hear about threats when everything seemed perfect and photogenic and safe. The man moved closer to the stage during Jake's speech, his hand reaching inside his jacket in a movement that Sarah recognized instantly from hundreds of hours of training. Time slowed in the way it always did in crisis moments, her brain processing threats and responses faster than conscious thought, her body already moving before her mind fully registered the danger. She saw the gun emerging, saw Jake still smiling at Tyler, completely unaware of what was coming, saw Brittany checking her Instagram comments instead of the room around her. The hospital security guards were looking the wrong direction, focused on the crowd rather than the VIP section where threats weren't supposed to exist. Sarah calculated distances and angles and acceptable casualties, running through scenarios in the millisecond before she had to act. "Gun." The word came out as a command rather than a warning, Sarah's voice cutting through the polite applause like a blade through silk. She was already sprinting toward the stage, her training overriding every instinct to take cover, every rational calculation that said she couldn't possibly reach Jake before the gunman fired. The crowd started screaming, people diving under tables or stampeding toward exits in the chaos that follows violence in civilized spaces. The gunman's eyes locked on Jake, his finger tightening on the trigger, his face twisted with rage that had been carefully hidden under his ill-fitting suit. Sarah knew she wasn't going to make it in time, knew that physics and distance were against her, but Marines didn't stop charging just because the odds were impossible. She hit Jake with her full body weight, knocking him off the stage and onto the floor just as the first shot cracked through the ballroom's expensive acoustics. Tyler screamed, Brittany shrieked, and 200 donors experienced the kind of terror that their wealth usually protected them from. Sarah landed on top of Jake, shielding his body with her own while her hand automatically went to her weapon. The gunman fired again, the bullet meant for Jake's center mass instead tearing through Sarah's left shoulder with pain that felt like molten metal poured directly into nerve endings. She gasped but didn't lose focus, her right hand drawing her Glock in one smooth motion despite the agony radiating down her arm. Years of training made the next movements automatic. Acquire target, fire twice, maintain position. The gunman went down before he could fire a third shot, Sarah's rounds hitting him in the chest with a precision that came from being Force Recon's best markswoman 3 years running. Hospital security finally responded, converging on the fallen shooter, while the ballroom erupted into pandemonium that would fuel news cycles for days. Sarah's vision was starting to blur from blood loss, but she stayed on top of Jake, protecting him until she was absolutely certain the threat was neutralized and no secondary shooters were present. Only when she heard the LAPD tactical team shouting clear did she finally roll off him, the adrenaline that had been keeping her functional finally giving way to the reality of her injury. Jake's tuxedo was soaked with her blood, his face white with shock as he stared up at her like he'd never actually seen her before this moment. "Don't you dare die on me," he whispered, pressing his jacket against her shoulder wound with shaking hands while paramedics rushed toward them. Sarah tried to smile, to say something reassuring, but the ballroom was spinning, and her mouth wouldn't form words anymore. The last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away was Tyler crying and Brittany screaming about her ruined dress. The gulf between those two reactions somehow summarizing everything wrong with Jake's world. 3 days, she'd promised him, but she'd only made it to day 3 before proving exactly why he needed real security all along. Jake had never felt terror like the moment he watched Sarah's eyes flutter close, her blood spreading across the marble floor in a pattern that would haunt his dreams for months to come. The paramedics worked on her with urgent efficiency. Terms like GSW and hemorrhaging and potential arterial damage fly between them while they cut away her jacket and revealed the full extent of her injury. Her shoulder was a mess of torn flesh and blood, the bullet having entered from behind and exited through the front, which meant she'd been shot while throwing herself on top of him, protecting his body with her own. Jake's hands were shaking so badly that one of the paramedics gently moved him aside, telling him he needed to let them work, but he couldn't look away from her pale face or the Purple Heart tattoo now visible above her collarbone. Brad appeared at his elbow. Phone already pressed his ear as he coordinated with publicists and lawyers and insurance agents in the mechanical way he handled every crisis. "Jake, you're okay. That's what matters. The shooter is down. The event is over. We need to get you out of here before the media circus gets worse." But Jake couldn't move, couldn't process Brad's rapid-fire instructions about statements and liability and optics. All he could see was Sarah's blood on his hands, his tuxedo, the floor, everywhere. She'd been working for him for exactly 72 hours, and he'd spent most of that time dismissing her concerns, mocking her caution, treating her like an inconvenience rather than a professional who just saved his life. The guilt was crushing, made worse by the memory of his own voice saying she's too paranoid for civilian life, just hours ago in this very building. The paramedics loaded Sarah onto a gurney, shouting instructions to each other as they wheeled her toward the ambulance bay at the kind of speed that suggested she didn't have time to spare. Jake followed automatically, ignoring Brad's protests about security protocols and media exposure, his entire focus on the woman who'd taken a bullet meant for him. Tyler was crying against his mother's shoulder, and Jake saw the fear in the boy's eyes. Fear that his hero might have died, that violence could intrude even into places meant for healing and hope. Brittany caught up to them in the hallway, her designer dress indeed ruined with blood spatters. But her first words were, "My followers are freaking out. Should I go live and tell them I'm okay?" The sheer narcissism of the question made Jake physically recoil, seeing his girlfriend clearly for perhaps the first time in their 2 years together. "She saved my life," Jake said numbly, watching the ambulance doors close behind Sarah's gurney, the emergency lights already starting to flash as they prepared to race toward the trauma center. Brad was still on his phone, his voice sharp as he negotiated with hospital administrators about privacy and access. Brittany checked a reflection in a hallway mirror, fixing her makeup even though tears would have been more appropriate for someone who just witnessed an attempted murder. The disconnect was staggering. Sarah bleeding out in an ambulance, while everyone around Jake seemed more concerned about managing the story than the person who'd been shot. "Brad, which hospital?" Jake demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with the same authority he used calling plays on the field. "I'm going there. Now. Don't argue." The ride to Cedars-Sinai took 20 minutes through Los Angeles traffic. Jake in the back of his Escalade with Brittany, beside him still scrolling through social media reactions instead of processing what had happened. "Baby, TMZ is already calling you a hero for staying calm during the shooting. We should definitely make a statement." Her fingers flew across her phone, probably drafting Instagram captions, while Sarah fought for her life in an oar. Jake felt something break inside him, some tolerance for superficiality that had been holding together through sheer force of habit. She's a hero, Brittany. She's the one who got shot. Do you understand that? His voice came out harsher than intended, making Brittany flinch and look at him with genuine confusion, like she couldn't understand why he was upset when the cameras hadn't caught him bleeding. Brad's phone rang as they pulled into the hospital's VIP entrance, his expression shifting from professional management to genuine alarm as he listened to whoever was calling. Jake, that was LAPD. They need to talk to you about the shooter. Apparently, this wasn't just a random attack. The detective was already waiting in the hospital's private conference room, a stern-faced woman named Martinez, who looked like she'd seen every permutation of human violence and was impressed by NFL fame. Mr. Morrison, the shooter's name was Dennis Harlow. He lost $2 million betting on Cowboys games last season, specifically games where you threw interceptions in crucial moments. He was a high-stakes gambler who convinced himself that you were intentionally throwing games, costing him his life savings. He planned this for 6 months. The revelation hit Jake like a linebacker. Someone had tried to kill him not because they were crazy or obsessed with celebrity, but because they'd lost money and needed someone to blame. All of Sarah's concerns about threat assessment and security protocols suddenly seemed prescient rather than paranoid. Did she know? Jake asked, his voice hoarse. When she insisted on arriving early, on checking security, on staying alert even after I told her to relax, did she somehow predict this? Martinez pulled up security footage on her tablet, showing Sarah tracking Harlow through the ballroom from the moment he entered, her body language tense and ready even while Jake was on stage being photographed with sick children. Your bodyguard followed protocol perfectly, Mr. Morrison. She identified a potential threat, attempted to report it, and when unable to prevent the attack through standard channels, she neutralized it at great personal cost. She tried to warn us? Brad's voice was quiet, his usual confident spin replaced by something that might have been shame. Martinez nodded, pulling up Sarah's messages to the hospital security team. Timestamped 40 minutes before the shooting, flagging Harlow as suspicious, requesting backup observation. Messages that had been ignored because nobody wanted to bother with paranoid security contractors during a charity event. Jake felt sick, remembering how he'd waved off her concerns that morning, how he'd told Brad she was too paranoid for civilian life. She'd been doing her job perfectly, and everyone around her, including him especially, had treated her expertise like an annoyance rather than the life-saving intervention it was. The surgeon finally emerged from the oar, his scrub spotted with blood that Jake recognized as Sarah's, his expression professionally neutral in the way doctors learn to deliver news that could shatter worlds. Miss Chun is stable, the surgeon said, and Jake felt his knees go weak with relief he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. The bullet missed major arteries, but there was significant tissue damage, and she lost considerable blood. She'll need months of physical therapy, and there may be permanent mobility limitations in her left arm. The doctor paused, making eye contact with Jake in a way that suggested he knew exactly who Sarah had been protecting. She's conscious now, asking about the client she was assigned to protect. I told her you were fine, but she didn't believe me. Said she needed to verify with her own eyes that the principal was secure. Even drugged and injured, Sarah was still doing her job, still putting Jake's safety above her own recovery, and the realization made him hate himself a little bit. Sarah's hospital room was quiet, except for the beeping monitors that tracked her vitals with mechanical precision. Jake stood in the doorway for a long moment before entering, struck by how small she looked in the hospital bed. This woman who'd moved with such decisive strength just hours ago, now pale and fragile with tubes and wires connecting her to machines that kept her alive. Her eyes were closed, dark circles underneath suggesting pain that medication couldn't fully address. The Purple Heart tattoo on her collarbone was clearly visible now, along with scars Jake hadn't noticed before. One along her jaw, another disappearing under her hospital gown. The physical evidence of a life spent in harm's way. He'd never asked about her background beyond the basic resume. Never bothered to learn why someone with her qualifications was working low-paying bodyguard jobs for celebrities. Her eyes opened when he stepped into the room, immediately doing a visual assessment that made him realize she was checking him for injuries even now. Mr. Morrison, she said, her voice hoarse from anesthesia, but still professional somehow. I apologize for the disruption to your schedule. I'm sure Brad has already arranged for a replacement security detail. The apology was so absurd, so wildly inappropriate given that she'd been shot protecting him, that Jake actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised them both. You're apologizing? Sarah, you saved my life. You got shot because I was too arrogant to listen to your security concerns. If anyone should be apologizing, it's me. He pulled a chair close to her bed, sitting down heavily like a man who'd been carrying weight he didn't know how to put down. The detective Martinez knocked on the doorframe, entering with the purposeful stride of someone who had questions that couldn't wait for convenient moments. Ms. Chun, I'm Detective Martinez with LAPD. I need to ask you some questions about the shooting, if you're feeling up to it. Sarah nodded, her professional mask slipping back into place despite the pain medication, making her movements slow and careful. Martinez pulled out a recording device, then a folder that made Jake's stomach clench with sudden apprehension. Your resume says you worked private security in Dallas before this assignment, but that's not entirely accurate, is it? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Jake realized he was about to learn things about Sarah that she deliberately kept hidden from him. I served in the United States Marine Corps for 11 years, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that simple words couldn't convey. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Force reconnaissance, hostage rescue, direct action, unconventional warfare. I left with the rank of captain and multiple commendations, including a Bronze Star and Purple Heart from an IED strike in Helmand Province. She paused, her breathing careful around what Jake suspected was significant pain. I resigned my commission 3 years ago when my husband, Staff Sergeant David Chun, was killed during a Taliban ambush. I had a 6-year-old daughter who'd already spent too many years waiting for parents to come home from deployment. So I came home, took civilian work, and tried to give her the stable childhood she deserved. The revelation made Jake feel like he'd been tackled by someone he never saw coming. This woman he dismissed as just a bodyguard was a decorated war hero who'd given up a military career to raise her daughter alone. Martinez pulled out more documents, including a mission report that had been partially redacted by military intelligence censors. Captain Chun, your last deployment included extracting a high-value target from a compound in Kandahar against significant enemy resistance. The after-action report credits you with saving 4 lives and eliminating 7 hostile combatants while wounded yourself. She looked at Jake, her expression making clear that she was sharing this information specifically so he would understand what kind of person had taken a bullet for him. You were assigned to protect Mr. Morrison because you're one of the best personal security specialists on the West Coast, despite your modesty about your qualifications. I didn't tell him about my background because it wasn't relevant, Sarah said, meeting Jake's eyes for the first time since the confession began. You needed a bodyguard, not my life story. Military service doesn't make me special. It just trained me to do this job well. But Jake was seeing her differently now, cataloging every interaction through this new lens. Her systematic inspection of his penthouse, her calm under pressure, her refusal to be intimidated by his wealth or status. She hadn't been paranoid or overprotective. She'd been operating at a level of professional excellence that everyone around her had been too ignorant to recognize. I have Mia's school performance to attend tomorrow evening, Sarah continued, trying to shift conversation away from herself. She's playing a tree in the kindergarten play. I'll need to arrange for someone to cover that shift. Mia, Jake interrupted, the name clicking into place with the crayon drawing the paramedics had found in Sarah's jacket pocket. Your daughter? Sarah nodded, her expression softening in a way he'd never seen before, the tough military professional giving way to something more vulnerable and human. She's 6, 1st grade. David died before she turned 4, so she barely remembers him, just knows that Daddy was a hero who didn't come home. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, pain that had nothing to do with her shoulder wound. I took this job because the hours were predictable. The pay covered rent in a decent school district, and I could be home for dinner every night. Being a single mom doesn't pay well, and my military benefits only stretch so far when you're trying to raise a kid in California. Brad entered the room before Jake could respond, his phone already out as he delivered the news that would shatter Sarah's fragile security. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I have to inform you that the security company is terminating your contract effective immediately. Liability concerns. The company's insurance won't cover contractors who've been involved in shooting incidents, even if they were protecting the client." He had the grace to look uncomfortable as he delivered the news, but not uncomfortable enough to fight it. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance and a positive reference for future employment. We appreciate your service." The bureaucratic cruelty of it, getting fired while lying in a hospital bed after saving her client's life, made Jake want to throw something at Brad's perfectly styled head. "You can't be serious," Jake said, his voice rising with an anger that made the monitors beat faster as Sarah's stress level spiked. "She saved my life and you're firing her?" Brad's expression was sympathetic but firm, the look of someone delivering bad news that they couldn't change. "Jake, it's not my decision. It's the company's liability insurance. They have a zero-tolerance policy for contractors involved in firearms incidents, regardless of circumstances." Sarah knew the terms when she signed her contract. He turned to leave, probably uncomfortable with Jake's growing fury, but paused at the door with an afterthought that would prove disastrous. "Oh, and there's one more thing. Our investigators found some irregularities in Dennis Harlow's gambling activities. Your business manager, Gary, has some explaining to do. Turns out he's been feeding game information to high-stakes betting rings, which might explain how Harlow knew where you'd be today." The hospital room felt too small suddenly, Jake's world collapsing into revelations that he couldn't process fast enough. Sarah was a war hero who'd sacrificed her career for her daughter. His business manager had been committing federal crimes, and the woman who'd saved his life was being punished for it by bureaucratic liability concerns. Detective Martinez was already on her phone, calling in warrants for Gary's arrest, her face grim with the satisfaction of catching corruption. Brittany finally appeared in the doorway, still wearing her blood-stained designer dress, her phone held at the perfect angle for a selfie. "Jake, baby, we need to talk about the media response. Should I post a statement about how we're both recovering from this trauma together?" She smiled at her phone screen, practicing angles, completely oblivious to the emotional carnage unfolding around her. The FBI arrived the next morning while Sarah was still hospitalized, 2 agents in dark suits who confirmed what Brad had discovered. Gary Thompson, Jake's business manager for the past 5 years, had been running a sophisticated gambling operation that required inside information about Jake's performance and schedule. The scheme had netted Gary over $3 million, while putting Jake in constant danger from angry gamblers who blamed him for their losses. "Mr. Morrison, your manager gave Dennis Harlow your complete schedule for the past 6 months," Agent Williams explained, showing Jake printouts that made his stomach turn. "Harlow was just the tip of the iceberg. There are at least a dozen other high-stakes losers who blame you for their financial problems, all of whom now have your home address, regular locations, and daily patterns thanks to Gary's information sharing." Jake sat in Sarah's hospital room listening to the agents detail the scope of Gary's betrayal, feeling stupid and blind and furious at himself for trusting someone who'd been selling him out from day one. Sarah was supposed to be resting, but she listened with the quiet intensity of someone cataloging tactical information for future use. The charity event was specifically chosen by Harlow because Gary told him you'd be on stage, unprotected, with minimal security and maximum crowd distraction. Agent Williams continued, "Your previous security team was Gary's recommendation, chosen specifically because they were inexperienced and wouldn't notice the threats Gary was creating. When your insurance company mandated better protection after the garage incident, Gary tried to sabotage Ms. Chen's hiring by spreading rumors about female bodyguards being unreliable and paranoid. That's why Brad kept calling her paranoid," Jake said, the pieces finally clicking together into a picture that made him want to punch something. "Gary was feeding him that narrative, making sure I'd dismiss her concerns." Sarah stirred in her hospital bed, her left arm still immobilized but her eyes sharp despite the pain medication. "Mr. Morrison, standard security protocol would have caught this pattern if anyone had been looking for it. 3 major security failures in 6 months, all coinciding with your manager's access to your schedule? That's not bad luck. That's insider threat." Her voice was matter-of-fact, military training, making her assess the situation tactically rather than emotionally. Gary knew exactly how to exploit your security gaps because he was creating them deliberately. The hospital door burst open and Brittany stormed in, her face flushed with fury that had nothing to do with attempted murder or criminal conspiracies. "Jake Morrison, are you kidding me right now? I just saw TMZ. They're saying you spent the night at her hospital instead of coming home with me." She pointed dramatically at Sarah, her perfectly manicured nails stabbing the air with accusatory precision. "Do you have any idea how this looks? People are already shipping you too, making romantic edits of you covered in her blood, saying she's your real soulmate because she took a bullet for you." The tantrum was so wildly inappropriate given the circumstances that even the FBI agents looked uncomfortable, but Brittany was just getting started with her performance. "I have 5 million followers, Jake. 5 million people who watch our relationship and buy the products I promote because I'm dating you." Brittany's voice rose to a pitch that made Sarah's monitoring equipment register increased stress levels. "If you dumb me for some bodyguard who got lucky with a tackle, my entire brand collapses. Do you understand what that means? I have partnerships, sponsorships, a lifestyle to maintain." She finally noticed the FBI agents, her emotional display faltering slightly as she realized she had an audience. "Oh, sorry. I didn't know you had visitors." The apology was automatic but insincere, her eyes already calculating how to spin this scene if it ended up online somehow. Agent Williams excused himself and his partner diplomatically, leaving Jake alone with 2 women who represented completely different versions of his life. "Brittany, a man tried to kill me yesterday," Jake said slowly, trying to find patience he no longer felt for her dramatics. "Sarah got shot saving my life. My business manager was arrested for federal gambling crimes. Maybe your Instagram partnerships aren't the priority right now." But Brittany was already scrolling through her phone, reading comments from her followers with a kind of focus she never applied to actual conversations. Everyone saying I looked selfish at the hospital, that I cared more about my dress than the shooting. My engagement rate is down 17%. She finally looked up at Jake, tears in her eyes that might have been genuine if they weren't so perfectly calculated. "You have to post something supporting me. Tell everyone we're solid. Show them that tacky bodyguard didn't come between us." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her hospital bed, clearly wanted to be anywhere but in the middle of this relationship drama. "I should go," she said quietly, starting to disconnect her phone with her good hand despite the nurse's earlier warnings about staying put. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sure the FBI and your new security team can handle the remaining threat assessment without me." But Jake stood up, his decision crystallizing with the kind of clarity he usually only felt on the football field when he saw the perfect play developing. "Sarah, stay. Please. Brittany, we need to talk." He gestured toward the hallway, but Brittany was already backing away, her phone held up like a shield between them. "Don't you dare break up with me in a hospital, Jake Morrison. Not when I've stood by you through everything, when I'm a victim too." "You're a victim?" The question came from Sarah, her professional mask finally cracking to reveal something sharp and angry underneath. "You're a victim because your boyfriend almost got murdered and it affected your social media engagement?" Brittany turned on her, fury replacing tears with startling speed. "Who asked you? You're just a help, the hired help who decided to play hero for attention." The attack was so vicious, so deliberately cruel, that Jake actually stepped between them instinctively. "That's enough, Brittany. Sarah saved my life while you were worried about your dress. The difference between you two couldn't be more clear." He turned to Sarah, ignoring his girlfriend's gasp of outrage behind him. "You're not fired. I'm hiring you directly, not through the security company. Whatever your previous salary was, I'm tripling it, plus full health insurance and housing assistance, so you can live closer to better schools for Mia." The offer hung in the room like a grenade with the pin pulled, Jake proposing financial security to the woman who'd save his life, while his girlfriend realized she was being replaced in more ways than one. Brittany's face contorted through several emotions before settling on calculating rage. "You're choosing her? Some single mom Marine with PTSD and daddy issues." The insult was designed to wound, but Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral, years of military discipline helping her maintain composure. "I'll ruin you both," Brittany continued, her voice dropping to a hiss that promised actual malice. "I have screenshots of texts that will make you look terrible, photos that I can spin however I want. 5 million followers will believe whatever I tell them. By tomorrow, everyone will think Essichi seduced you while recovering from being shot, that you're having some crisis hero worship affair. Do your worst," Jake said tiredly, finally seeing Brittany for exactly what she was: beautiful, shallow, and fundamentally incapable of caring about anything that didn't directly benefit her brand. But before you start crafting your victim narrative, you should know that TMZ already has footage of you texting and smiling during the shooting. Someone captured you checking Instagram comments while Sarah was bleeding on the floor beside me. Your followers might forgive a lot, but they won't forgive that. The threat landed like a physical blow, Brittany's face going white as she realized her own social media addiction had been caught on camera. She fled the room without another word, heels clicking frantically down the hospital corridor, already probably calling her PR team to start damage control. The silence after Brittany left felt immense, Sarah and Jake alone together for the first time since the shooting. "Mr. Morrison, you don't have to," Sarah started, but Jake held up his hand, stopping her automatic deflection. "Call me Jake. Please. And yes, I do have to. You saved my life. Got shot because I was too arrogant to listen to your expertise, and then got fired while lying in a hospital bed. Hiring you directly is literally the least I can do." He pulled his chair closer to her bed, meeting her eyes with an honesty he rarely showed anyone. "But beyond the job offer, I want to apologize. I judged you from the moment we met, treated you like you were paranoid or overreacting, dismissed every concern you raised because I thought fame made me special somehow. You tried to warn us about Harlow, and nobody listened until it was almost too late." Sarah was released from the hospital 3 days later with strict orders for physical therapy and restrictions on using her left arm that would make her job temporarily impossible. Jake had insisted on driving her home personally, ignoring Brad's protests about security protocols and media attention. Her apartment in Pasadena was exactly what he'd expected: small, clean, and filled with evidence of Mia's presence. Crayon drawings on the refrigerator, a backpack by the door, toys neatly organized in a corner basket. The purple heart tattoo he'd noticed wasn't decoration. It was memorial ink for her husband, the dates of David Chen's life inscribed in elegant script beneath the military symbol. Sarah moved through her space carefully, favoring her injured shoulder while trying to maintain the independence that defined her. "Mia's at my sister's house in San Diego," Sarah explained, her voice carrying a loneliness that made Jake's chest hurt. "I didn't want her to see me like this, injured and weak. She's had enough trauma watching parents leave and not come back whole." Jake understood suddenly why Sarah had taken a job beneath her qualifications, why she'd hidden her military background, why she'd been willing to accept less pay and respect. All of it was about giving her daughter the stability that constant deployments had denied her. The apartment's rent was probably crushing on a bodyguard salary, the school district's cost of living eating whatever she managed to save, but she'd chosen it anyway, because Mia deserved good schools and safe neighborhoods, and a mother who came home every night. The doorbell rang and Sarah tensed automatically, her hand going where her weapon would normally be holstered before remembering she wasn't on duty. Jake opened it to find Detective Martinez standing there with another woman in an expensive suit who introduced herself as Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chase. "Ms. Chun, we need to discuss the shooting incident and your role in it," Chase said, her tone professional but carrying an edge that made Jake's instincts fire warnings. "There are some irregularities in your actions that the DA's office needs to address before we close the case." Sarah's expression didn't change, but Jake noticed her breathing shift. A tell he was learning to recognize meant she was preparing for combat of a different kind. "What irregularities?" Jake demanded, stepping between Sarah and the ADA instinctively. "She saved my life, stopped an assassin, and got shot in the process. What's irregular about that?" Chase pulled out a folder, her movements precise and deliberate in a way that suggested she'd rehearsed this confrontation. "Ms. Chun fired her weapon in a crowded ballroom with civilians present, killing the suspect before he could be taken into custody for questioning. The DA is concerned about the use of lethal force, particularly given Ms. Chen's military background and training in alternatives to shooting." The implication was clear. Sarah should use non-lethal intervention. should have somehow disarmed a man who was actively trying to commit murder without killing him. Jake felt his blood pressure spike with rage at the sheer stupidity of prosecuting the woman who'd saved him. Detective Martinez looked uncomfortable, clearly disagreeing with her colleague but bound by professional loyalty. The review board also notes that Ms. Chung was technically no longer employed by the security company at the time of the shooting, since Mr. Morrison had expressed dissatisfaction with her services. This creates questions about whether she had authority to engage at all. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah had been fired, therefore she wasn't acting in official capacity. Therefore her intervention was technically assault with a deadly weapon. Chase continued relentlessly, building a case that sounded absurd but was legally plausible. Witnesses report that Ms. Shin seemed emotionally agitated during the event, that she'd been arguing with Mr. Morrison's management team, that she made threats about proving herself professionally. This suggests a possible PTSD episode, a veteran unable to distinguish between combat situations and civilian contexts, who overreacted to a perceived threat with military-level violence. That's completely insane, Jake shouted, but Sarah put her good hand on his arm, stopping his defensive tirade with a single gesture. "They're building a narrative," she said quietly, her tactical mind processing the attack vectors being deployed against her. Single mom, military background, PTSD concerns, unemployment desperation. "They're painting me as unstable and dangerous, someone who killed a man to prove she was still valuable." She met Chase's eyes directly, refusing to be intimidated by legal maneuvering. "What do you want? A confession? My testimony against someone? Or is this about protecting the hospital and security company from liability by shifting blame to the contractor who wasn't properly supervised?" The question was sharp enough to make Chase's professional mask slip slightly, revealing calculation underneath. "The DA is prepared to offer a deal," Chase said, pulling out documents that made Jake's lawyer instinct scream danger even though he'd never been to law school. "Plead guilty to reckless endangerment and unlawful discharge of firearm, accept probation and a suspended sentence, agree not to sue the hospital or security company for wrongful termination or inadequate support. In exchange, we don't press charges for manslaughter or pursue the PTSD angle that would likely result in your daughter being placed in protective services while you undergo psychiatric evaluation." The threat was elegant in its cruelty. "Plead guilty to crimes you didn't commit, or we'll use a legal system to take away the daughter you sacrificed everything to protect." Jake wanted to flip the coffee table, wanted to call every lawyer he knew, wanted to personally destroy everyone involved in this prosecutorial nightmare. Sarah's face had gone completely blank, the way Jake imagined she looked during combat missions when emotions were a luxury that could get you killed. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked, her voice steady despite the terror Jake could see in her micro-expressions. 48 hours, Chase said, standing to lead with Martinez, following reluctantly behind. "Consider carefully, Ms. Chun. Your daughter's stability is at stake, and foster care situations can be unpredictable for children who've already experienced trauma." The threat wasn't even subtle, just raw power wielded against someone who lacked resources to fight back. After they left, Sarah sat down heavily on her worn couch, her injured shoulder clearly hurting, but her focus entirely on the legal disaster threatening to destroy her life. "I'll fight this," Jake said immediately, pulling out his phone to call every lawyer contact in his directory. "This is prosecutorial misconduct, malicious prosecution, abuse of process." But Sarah shook her head, her exhaustion finally showing through the Marine mask. "Jake, you're a millionaire NFL quarterback. I'm a single mom with no savings and a daughter in first grade. Even if I win in court eventually, the process will destroy us. Foster care, legal fees, character assassination in the media. Mia will pay the price for my heroism, which is exactly what they're counting on." She pulled out her phone, looking at a photo of a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile who looked exactly like her mother. "Maybe I should take the deal. Probation I can handle. But losing Mia? That would kill me faster than any bullet." Jake sat down beside her, careful not to jostle her injured shoulder, his mind racing through options and strategies. "There has to be another way. Publicity? Media pressure? I have platforms, connections, people who owe me favors." But even as he said it, he knew Sarah was right. The system was designed to crush people who couldn't afford elite lawyers, who didn't have resources to fight multi-year legal battles. Let me hire you the best criminal defense attorney in California. No, the best in the country. Money is not an object here, Sarah. You saved my life. The absolute least I can do is make sure you don't get prosecuted for it. He realized he was gripping his phone so hard it might crack, channeling all his helpless rage into plastic and glass that couldn't fight back. Why? Sarah asked quietly, the first crack in her composure showing through. Why do you care so much? I was your employee for 3 days. You fired me. You could just move on, hire a new security team, forget this whole nightmare. But Jake realized he couldn't articulate exactly when Sarah had stopped being just an employee and become someone he genuinely cared about. Maybe when she'd thrown herself in front of Bullet, maybe when he learned about her daughter and dead husband, maybe when he'd understood that she'd sacrificed a military career for motherhood and dignity. Because you're not just anyone, he said finally, the honesty feeling risky but necessary. You're someone who believes in something beyond yourself, who makes choices based on who you are rather than what's convenient. That's rare. That's worth protecting. The moment stretched between them, something shifting in the space that had nothing to do with employment or obligation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Mia keeps asking when Mommy's coming. How do I explain that heroes get hurt? The message broke whatever spell had been forming, bringing them both back to the harsh reality of courts and custody and career-ending accusations. I need to see her, Sarah said, standing up despite the pain it clearly caused. I need to be with my daughter, even if it's just for a few hours before everything falls apart. Jake stood too, making a decision that felt both reckless and absolutely right. Then let's go to San Diego. I'll drive, and on the way, you're going to tell me everything about your case, and we're going to find someone who can fight this. The drive to San Diego took 2 hours through California traffic, Jake behind the wheel of his Escalade, while Sarah dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, her pain medication finally catching up with her adrenaline. He'd made 17 phone calls during the drive, connected with criminal defense attorneys, media consultants, and even a senator who owed him a favor from a charity event. By the time they pulled up to Sarah's sister Amy's modest house in Chula Vista, Jake had assembled a legal defense team that would make the DA's office regret threatening to take away her daughter. The cost would be astronomical, easily 6 figures for preliminary hearings alone. But Jake found he didn't care about the money, only about making sure Sarah didn't have to choose between her freedom and her child. Mia came running out of the house the moment Sarah stepped from the car, a tiny tornado of pigtails and joy who hit her mother with enough force to make Sarah gasp in pain before catching herself. Mommy, you're okay. Aunt Amy said you were hurt, but you're here. The little girl's face was pressed against Sarah's good side, her small arms wrapped around her mother's waist with fierce protectiveness. Jake watched Sarah transform completely, her military bearings softening into pure maternal love as she knelt down carefully to hug her daughter properly. I'm okay, baby. I promise I'm okay. It's going to take more than a little ow-ow to keep me from you. The exchange was so intimate, so full of love that it survived war and loss and struggle, that Jake felt like an intruder witnessing something sacred. Mia finally noticed Jake standing behind her mother, her eyes going wide with recognition that suggested she actually watched football despite being 6 years old. You're Jake Morrison, the Cowboys quarterback. Mommy, why is Jake Morrison in Aunt Amy's driveway? The question was delightfully straightforward in the way only children could be, cutting through all adult complexity to the simple weirdness of famous people showing up unannounced. Sarah laughed, the first genuine sound of joy Jake had heard from her since the shooting. Mr. Morrison gave me a ride, sweetie. He's a friend. The hesitation before friend suggested Sarah wasn't quite sure what label to apply to their relationship, which was fair since Jake wasn't sure either. He just knew that watching her hug her daughter made something in his chest hurt in a good way. Amy invited them inside for dinner, a chaotic affair of spaghetti and garlic bread, while Mia chattered nonstop about first grade and her upcoming school play and her friend Jessica, who could do a cartwheel. Jake found himself helping set the table, feeling oddly comfortable in this modest house that was nothing like his penthouse but somehow felt more like home. Sarah's sister watched him with protective suspicion, clearly trying to figure out whether he was exploiting her injured sibling or genuinely trying to help. "So you're the famous quarterback," Amy said during a momentary break in Mia's monologue. "The one whose business manager tried to get him killed." Sarah mentioned the shooting, but she didn't mention you'd appointed yourself her personal driver and legal consultant. "I owe her my life," Jake said simply, watching Mia draw a picture of what appeared to be a stick figure tackling another stick figure. Her interpretation of her mother's heroism. "She saved me, got shot, got fired, and now she's being prosecuted for doing the right thing. The least I could do is make sure she has the resources to fight back." Amy's expression softened slightly, but her protective instincts remained sharp. "Sarah's been through enough, Mr. Morrison. War, widowhood, single parenthood on an impossible budget. If you're here out of guilt or obligation or some quarterback hero complex, then you should leave before Mia gets attached. That little girl has already lost one parent. She doesn't need temporary people in her life who will disappear when the novelty wears off." The warning was fair, even if it stung more than Jake wanted to admit. He was about to respond when his phone rang with a call from Marcus Washington, one of the top criminal defense attorneys in California. "Jake, I reviewed the case. The DA is building a narrative, but it's weak. Classic overcharging to force a plea deal. We can fight this, but it's going to be expensive and public. Ms. Chun needs to be prepared for her entire life to be scrutinized, her military record examined, her fitness as a mother questioned. It's going to get ugly before it gets better." Jake looked at Sarah, who was helping Mia color inside the lines of her stick figure drawing. Her face relaxed in a way he'd never seen during their brief professional relationship. "How ugly?" he asked, stepping into the hallway for privacy. "Ugliest," Marcus said bluntly. "They'll subpoena her mental health records, interview everyone she's ever worked with, put expert witnesses on the stand to testify about PTSD and military veterans who can't adjust to civilian life. They'll paint her as a dangerous loose cannon who killed a man because she missed the adrenaline of combat. And if that doesn't work, they'll go after her parenting, claim that her job choices expose her daughter to danger, that she has anger management issues, that Mia will be better off in a stable two-parent home." The strategy was vicious but predictable, using society's biases against single mothers and military veterans to destroy Sarah's credibility. But here's the thing, they can only do that if we play defense. If we go on offense, make this about prosecutorial misconduct and malicious charging, we can flip the narrative. I need you to give me everything: witness statements, video footage, medical records, character references. And I need your permission to get very aggressive with the media. Jake made the decision without hesitation. "Do it. Whatever you need, whatever it costs. Just make sure she doesn't lose her daughter." He ended the call and returned to the kitchen, where Mia was now showing Sarah a spelling test with a gold star at the top. "Mommy, look, I spelled beautiful, right?" Mrs. Johnson said it's a really hard word for first grade. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to let fall, her good hand stroking her daughter's hair with infinite tenderness. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You're so smart and strong and perfect." The moment crystallized something for Jake. This was what real success looked like, not touchdown passes or endorsement deals, but mother and daughter surviving impossible circumstances with love intact. "Sarah, I talked to Marcus Washington," Jake said, pulling up a chair across from her. "He's one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state, and he's willing to take your case. Pro bono, if necessary, though I'm planning to cover his fees regardless." Sarah's head snapped up, surprise and suspicion warring in her expression. "Jake, I can't accept charity. I know you mean well, but I need to stand on my own." But Amy interrupted before Sarah could finish her automatic refusal. "For once in your stubborn Marine life, say yes to help. You carried everyone else for so long. Let someone carry you for a change." The sisters locked eyes, some wordless communication passing between them that Jake couldn't decode but respected nonetheless. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing arrived with media circus attached. Jake's fame turning Sarah's case into national news. Reporters camped outside the courthouse covering the bodyguard shooting. Marcus had assembled an impressive defense. Footage showing Harlow's weapon, expert testimony from Sarah's Marine commanders, testimony from Jake himself about how she tried to warn them before the shooting. The ADA, Rebecca Chase, looked increasingly uncomfortable as witness after witness destroyed her narrative of an unstable veteran overreacting to imagined threats. Detective Martinez, clearly relieved to finally tell the truth, explained how Sarah had followed protocol perfectly while hospital security had ignored her warnings, making it clear that any failure was institutional rather than individual. But the turning point came when Brad took the stand, his expression genuinely regretful as he admitted Gary's influence on Jake's security arrangements. The business manager specifically tried to sabotage Ms. Chen's hiring, told her she was paranoid and overqualified, suggested that a female bodyguard would hurt Jake's image with male fans. In retrospect, Gary was creating vulnerabilities that he could exploit for his gambling operation, and Sarah Chun was the first security professional competent enough to notice the patterns. The testimony destroyed Chase's narrative completely. Sarah hadn't been paranoid. She'd been the only person doing her job correctly while everyone else enabled corruption. When Jake testified about her saving his life, about her daughter's drawings, and her sacrifice for his safety, several jury members were visibly crying. The judge dismissed all charges with prejudice, delivering a scathing rebuke to the DA's office for wasting the court's time with vindictive prosecution of a genuine American hero. Chase left the courtroom without comment, her political aspirations probably damaged beyond repair by the public backlash. Sarah emerged into the courthouse steps with Mia holding her hand, Jake on her other side, and Marcus beaming at the cameras like a man who just won the trial of his career. Reporters shouted questions, but Jake just held up his hand for silence. Ms. Chun is a decorated Marine veteran, a devoted mother, and the woman who saved my life. The real question isn't why she intervened. It's why our legal system tried to punish her for being a hero. I'm proud to call her my friend, and I'm grateful every day that she was brave enough to act when everyone else froze. The press conference footage went viral within hours. Jake's passionate defense of Sarah, Mia's innocent questions about why people were taking pictures, and Sarah's quiet dignity throughout the circus. TMZ ran a story about Brittany's leaked text messages, revealing how she complained about Jake's obsession with that bodyguard and threatened to destroy them both if he broke up with her. The public backlash against Brittany was swift and brutal, her follower count dropping by 2 million overnight as sponsors quietly ended their partnerships. She tried to do damage control with a teary Instagram video, but the comments were merciless. You worry about your dress while she bled for him. Some women are gold diggers, others are gold standard. She took a bullet, you took selfies. 6 months passed in a blur of healing and reconstruction. Sarah's shoulder improved with physical therapy, though she'd never regained full mobility. Jake fired Brad and hired new management who actually valued competence over image, and Mia adjusted to their new life with the resilience of children who've learned that change doesn't always mean loss. Jake had offered Sarah the security director position for the entire Cowboys organization, a role that paid 6 figures and included full benefits, housing assistance, and flexible hours for single parents. She'd accepted after making him promise that it was merit-based rather than guilt-motivated, her pride still intact despite everything they'd been through together. The Cowboys' management had been shocked but impressed when Jake insisted, especially after Sarah's immediate improvements to their security protocols prevented 2 potential stalker situations in her first month. But more than professional relationship, something personal had developed between Jake and Sarah during those months of recovery and legal battles and shared dinners with Mia. Jake found himself looking forward to their morning security briefings, to the way Sarah challenged his assumptions without being afraid of his status, to how Mia had started calling him Uncle Jake and saving him crayon drawings of football players. He'd started reading bedtime stories to Mia on nights when Sarah had late meetings, had learned to braid hair for school days, had discovered that being needed for something beyond touchdowns felt more satisfying than any championship. Sarah remained cautious, her protective instincts making her wary of anything that might disrupt Mia's stability, but Jake could see her softening around the edges, letting him into their small family constellation. The proposal happened on a random Tuesday evening in Sarah's apartment, nothing orchestrated or staged like the public performances Jake had grown to hate. Mia was asleep in her bedroom, exhausted from a field trip to the zoo, and Sarah was reviewing security footage at her kitchen table while Jake cooked pasta because he'd learned she forgot to eat when working. "I've been thinking," Jake said, setting down a plate of spaghetti in front of her the way she liked it. Extra garlic, light sauce, Parmesan on the side. This thing between us, whatever it is, it works. We work. You've changed my entire understanding of what matters, what success actually looks like, what it means to be someone worth respecting." Sarah looked up from her computer, surprise and something softer in her expression. "Jake, we're friends. Good friends. You don't have to." But Jake shook his head, dropping into the chair across from her with the kind of determination that had made him a Hall of Fame quarterback before age 30. "I'm not good with romantic speeches, but I know what I want. I want mornings where Mia asks me to read her favorite book again. I want nights where you fall asleep on my shoulder reviewing security protocols. I want to be the person you call when you need backup, when you're scared, when you're happy. I want to deserve you and Mia, to be the kind of man worthy of the family you've built." He pulled out a simple ring, not the ostentatious diamond he would have bought for Brittany, but an elegant band with single sapphire the color of Marine Corps dress blues. "Marry me," Jake said simply, no grand gestures or public declarations, just two people who'd survived violence and betrayal and prosecutorial misconduct sitting in a modest apartment eating spaghetti. "Marry me and let me spend my life trying to be half as brave as you are. Let me be Mia's stepdad and teach her that men can be reliable and present and choose her every day. Let me prove that I've learned the difference between what glitters and what actually matters." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her good hand covering her mouth while she processed a proposal that would change everything again. "You don't have to answer now," Jake continued, suddenly nervous in a way he never felt on a football field. "Take time, think it through, make sure it's right for Mia." "Yes," Sarah interrupted, her voice shaky but certain. "Yes, I'll marry you, you impossible man who somehow makes me believe in second chances." She stood up and kissed him, tasting like garlic and tears and hope, and Jake felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't even known was restless. Mia appeared in her doorway 10 minutes later, rubbing her eyes and asking why adults were being loud. And when they told her the news, she asked if this meant Jake would officially be her dad now. "If that's okay with you," Jake said, kneeling down to her height. "I know I can't replace your real dad, but I'd be honored to be another person who loves you and your mom." Mia thought about it seriously, then nodded and said, "Okay, but you have to come to my school play next week, because dads are supposed to watch their daughters be trees." They married quietly at a Marine-based chapel 6 months later. Sarah in her dress blues with medals gleaming on her chest, Jake in a simple suit that cost less than his typical game day shoes, and Mia as flower girl, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself. Sarah's military friends filled the pews alongside Jake's former teammates. Two worlds colliding in the best possible way. The vows were traditional but felt revolutionary. Two people promising to choose each other daily, to build a life based on respect rather than convenience, to create family through intention rather than accident. When the chaplain pronounced them married, Mia cheered so loudly that the entire chapel laughed, and Jake lifted his new stepdaughter onto his shoulders while kissing his wife with joy that had nothing to do with cameras or publicity or brand management. A year later, twins arrived, a boy and a girl that Jake joked were the perfect balanced offense. And suddenly their modest house was filled with the chaos of 3 children and careers and security protocols and family dinners that ran 2 hours because everyone had stories to tell. Sarah became the youngest female security director in NFL history, implementing protocols that other teams immediately copied because they actually worked better than traditional approaches. Jake's game improved paradoxically, his focus sharpening now that he had reasons to come home that mattered more than championships. Mia thrived in her new school, her drawings now featuring a complete family instead of just her and mom, her confidence growing as she learned that dads could stay and siblings could be chosen and love could be bigger than loss. The American dream looked different than Jake had imagined during his poor Texas childhood. Not a penthouse or championship rings or Instagram followers, but a house full of laughter and crayon drawings, and a woman who'd taken a bullet for him and somehow ended up saving him in ways that had nothing to do with assassination attempts. Sarah had her own dreams realized. Financial security that meant Mia never worried about rent or food, professional respect for her actual qualifications, and a partner who understood that strength came in forms that couldn't be measured by bank accounts. Together they built something that neither could have achieved alone, a family that proved love could break class barriers, that heroism came in daily choices rather than single moments, and that sometimes a person you underestimate becomes a person you can't imagine living without. It was messy and complicated and imperfect and completely, beautifully real. The kind of ending that wasn't really an ending at all, just the beginning of everything that mattered